Some loves are written in the stars above ancient palaces, destined to bloom under red lanterns, and patient enough to wait a lifetime for the perfect moment to become forever. Yunli moved through the crowds of the Forbidden City like a graceful dancer navigating a familiar stage. At 29, she had been a tour guide at Beijing's most iconic landmark for 6 years, but the ancient palace walls still took her breath away every morning. The way the golden rooftops caught the early sunlight, the whispered stories echoing through corridors where emperors once walked, the timeless beauty that made visitors from around the world fall silent in wonder. But today felt different. As she prepared for her morning tour group, adjusting the small red badge that identified her as an official guide, Yun couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to happen. Perhaps it was the way the autumn air carried the scent of chrysanthemums from the imperial gardens, or how the morning light seemed more golden than usual, painting everything in shades of possibility. Her engagement ring caught the light as she organized her materials. A traditional jade band that her grandmother had worn, now binding her to a future she had never chosen. In 3 months, she would marry Chen Wei, a successful businessman her parents had carefully selected. It was a good match by every practical measure: financial security, social standing, family approval. Everything except love. Yun had learned to push thoughts of romantic love into the corners of her mind, focusing instead on her work, her family's expectations, her duty as a daughter. At 29, she was considered lucky to have such an advantageous arrangement. Many of her friends envied her practical approach to marriage, her acceptance of tradition over the uncertain pursuit of passion. As her tour group began to gather, a mix of international visitors clutching cameras and guidebooks, Yun spotted him immediately. A tall man with dark hair and kind eyes, carrying a professional camera with the easy confidence of someone who saw the world through lenses. He stood slightly apart from the others, not with the typical tourist eagerness, but with the patient observation of someone who understood that the best moments couldn't be rushed. Adrian Morales had traveled to Beijing on assignment for a Spanish travel magazine, but the Forbidden City wasn't just another destination to photograph. At 33, he had built his career capturing the soul of places, the moments when light and history and human emotion converged into something eternal. The ancient Chinese palace represented everything he loved about his work: layers of story waiting to be uncovered, beauty that demanded respect rather than quick consumption. He had arrived in China 3 days ago and would leave in 4 more days, a timeline that felt both generous and impossibly short. Adrian had learned to appreciate the intensity that came with brief travels, how every moment felt more vivid when you knew it was limited, how connections formed faster when time was a luxury you couldn't afford to waste. As he joined the small tour group gathering near the Meridian Gate, Adrian found his attention drawn not to the magnificent architecture, but to their guide. She moved with a quiet confidence that suggested deep familiarity with these ancient stones. But there was something in her expression, a distant sadness perhaps, or a longing for something beyond the walls that surrounded her daily life. If stories of love that defies time and distance, that blooms in the most unexpected places and endures against all odds speak to your heart, subscribe to the Untold Love Stories and journey with us through tales that prove some connections are written in the stars themselves. Welcome to the Forbidden City, Yun began in flawless English, her voice carrying the warmth of someone who genuinely loved sharing her culture with others. For nearly 500 years, this palace was home to emperors who believed they were the sons of heaven itself. Today, I invite you to walk in their footsteps and discover the stories these walls have kept secret for centuries. As the group moved through the massive Meridian Gate, Adrian found himself captivated not just by Yun's extensive knowledge, but by the poetry in how she described their surroundings. She didn't simply recite historical facts. She painted pictures with her words, making the past feel alive and present. When she spoke of imperial concubines watching sunsets from palace windows, he could almost see the silk-robed figures in the shadows. This courtyard, Yun explained as they entered the vast space before the Hall of Supreme Harmony, was designed to make visitors feel small before the Emperor's power. But I think it does something else. It reminds us that we are part of something larger than ourselves, connected to centuries of human dreams and ambitions. Her eyes met Adrian's briefly as she spoke, and something electric passed between them. Adrian raised his camera to capture the moment, but found himself focusing on Yun instead of the architecture. Through his lens, he saw how the ancient setting seemed to frame her perfectly, as if she belonged to this place in a way that transcended her role as a guide. When she noticed his attention, she smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her professional composure into something radiant and personal. As the tour continued through the Hall of Central Harmony and into the inner palace, Adrian began asking questions that went beyond typical tourist curiosity. He wanted to understand not just the history, but Yun's relationship with this place, what it meant to her to walk these paths every day surrounded by such concentrated beauty and power. "Do you ever feel overwhelmed by the history here?" Adrian asked during a quiet moment as the group explored the imperial garden. Yun paused, considering his question with the seriousness it deserved. "Sometimes I feel like I'm living in two worlds," she admitted. "The ancient one, full of stories and spirits and traditions that shaped everything I am, and the modern one, where I must navigate expectations and responsibilities that sometimes feel just as rigid as imperial protocol." There was something in her honesty that made Adrian want to know more, to understand the weight he sensed she was carrying. As a photographer, he had learned to read the stories people carried in their expressions, and Yun's face held volumes of unspoken complexity. He found himself wanting to capture not just her image, but her essence, the way she moved between worlds with grace, while harboring dreams she might never voice. When the official tour ended and the other visitors dispersed, Adrian approached Yun with a request that surprised them both with its boldness. "Would you be willing to show me some of the places tourists don't usually see? I'm here to capture the real spirit of this place, and I suspect you know secrets that aren't in any guidebook." Yun hesitated, glancing at her watch and mentally calculating her responsibilities versus this unexpected opportunity. Something in Adrian's request felt like more than professional curiosity. Perhaps it was the way he had listened to her stories with genuine interest, or how his questions revealed a deeper appreciation for the cultural significance of what surrounded them. "I have an hour before my next tour," she said finally. "There are some gardens most people never see, and a pavilion where the Empress used to write poetry. If you're interested in the real Forbidden City..." As they walked through lesser-known courtyards and hidden passages, Yun found herself sharing stories she rarely told. Personal observations about the palace's moods in different seasons, her theories about the private lives of historical figures, the dreams she sometimes had about conversations with ancient spirits who still wandered these halls. Adrian listened with the focused attention of someone who understood that she was offering him something precious. "You see this place differently than other guides," Adrian observed as they sat in a secluded pavilion surrounded by flowering bushes that had been planted centuries ago. "It's not just history to you, it's alive, isn't it? You have a relationship with it." Yun nodded, surprised by his understanding. "My grandmother used to say that places like this choose their guardians. Maybe it chose me, or maybe I chose it. Either way, I can't imagine my life anywhere else." Adrian began photographing Yun in natural moments, reading an inscription on an ancient stone, looking thoughtfully across a courtyard, laughing at a story she was telling about confused tourists. Through his lens, he discovered that she was even more beautiful when she forgot to be composed, when her professional mask slipped and revealed the woman who dreamed and wondered and felt deeply about everything around her. "Your photographs," Yun said, watching him work with quiet fascination. "They're not like typical tourist pictures. You're looking for something specific." Adrian lowered his camera and looked at her directly. "I photograph moments when people connect with something larger than themselves. when the past and present meet, when beauty reveals truth. He paused. I think I found what I was looking for today. The air between them seemed charged with recognition and possibility. They were strangers from different cultures, different languages, different worlds, but something fundamental connected them. A shared appreciation for beauty, for history, for the stories that places and people carry in their hearts. As the afternoon light began to soften, both Adrian and Yun realized that their brief encounter was transforming into something neither had expected, but both had been unconsciously seeking. As their private tour continued, Adrian found himself sharing stories of his own travels, his attempts to capture the essence of places through photography, his belief that every location held secrets waiting for the right person to discover them. Yun listened with growing fascination, drawn to his perspective on the world as an endless collection of stories waiting to be told. You must have incredible freedom, Yun said wistfully as they walked through a garden where empresses once strolled. Traveling wherever your work takes you, seeing new places, meeting people from everywhere. It sounds like a dream. Adrian heard something in her voice, a longing that suggested her own life felt more constrained than she was willing to directly admit. Freedom has its costs, Adrian replied thoughtfully. I see amazing things, meet interesting people, but I never stay long enough to really belong anywhere. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to have roots, to know a place so well that it becomes part of who you are, the way this palace seems to be part of you. They exchanged a look that acknowledged they each envied what the other had. It was then that Yoon's phone buzzed with a message that made her expression change completely. Adrian watched her face close off, professional composure replacing the openness she had shared with him. I'm sorry, she said formally. I need to prepare for my next tour. Thank you for an interesting afternoon. But as she began to leave, Adrian gently caught her arm. Yun, he said softly. I know we just met, but something happened here today. I felt it, and I think you did too. I'm not imagining this connection between us, am I? Yun stopped, her back still turned to him, and he could see the tension in her shoulders. Some connections are impossible, she said quietly. Some dreams are beautiful precisely because they can't become real. When she finally turned to face him, Adrian saw tears threatening to fall from her eyes. I'm engaged to be married in 3 months, she said simply. It's been arranged by our families. He's a good man, and it will be a good marriage by every measure that matters to the people I love. And you're leaving in 4 days to return to your life in Spain. Whatever this is between us, it can't go anywhere. Adrian felt as if the ancient palace walls were closing in around him. He had traveled the world, experienced many brief connections, but nothing had ever felt as immediately right as his afternoon with Yun. The thought of walking away from her felt impossible, but he also understood that he was asking her to consider abandoning everything secure and familiar for a man she had known for only a few hours. I understand duty, Adrian said finally, and I understand that what I'm feeling might sound crazy, but I also understand that some connections don't follow reasonable timelines. If you feel even a fraction of what I'm feeling right now, then we owe it to ourselves to explore what this could be, even if we only have a few days. That evening, against every rational thought in her mind, Yun met Adrian at a traditional tea house near the palace. She had spent the afternoon torn between duty and desire, between the safe path her family had laid out for her and the wild possibility that Adrian represented. As she approached the softly lit establishment, her heart raced with the knowledge that she was crossing a line from which there might be no return. Adrian was waiting at a corner table, 2 cups of jasmine tea growing cold as he watched the door with nervous anticipation. When Yun appeared, wearing a simple but elegant dress that made her look like poetry in motion, he felt his breath catch. She had chosen to come, despite every reasonable argument against it, and that choice filled him with hope and terror in equal measure. They talked for hours, about her childhood in Beijing, his travels through Europe and Latin America, their shared love of history and beauty, their fears about the paths their lives were taking. With each story shared, each laugh exchanged, each moment of comfortable silence, the connection between them deepened into something that felt both new and ancient, as if they had been searching for each other across time and continents. "Show me Beijing at night," Adrian said as they left the tea house. "I want to see your city the way you see it, not through a tourist's eyes." Yun led him through narrow hutongs lit by red lanterns, past street food vendors and elderly men playing xiangqi, through neighborhoods where traditional architecture stood alongside modern developments. With each step, she was sharing not just her city, but herself. They found themselves in a small park where families had hung hundreds of red lanterns for the upcoming Mid-Autumn Festival. The warm glow transformed the space into something magical, and as they walked beneath the floating lights, both Adrian and Yun felt as if they had stepped into a fairy tale where anything might be possible. "In Chinese tradition," Yun said softly as they stood beneath a particularly beautiful cluster of lanterns, "red symbolizes good fortune, joy, and the power of love to overcome obstacles. People hang these lanterns to invite happiness into their lives, to celebrate connections that bring light to darkness." Adrian took her hand, and she didn't pull away. "Yun," Adrian said, his voice filled with emotion, "I know this is crazy. I know I'm asking you to consider something that goes against everything practical and safe. But standing here with you, under these lights, I feel like I've found something I didn't even know I was missing. I can't promise you an easy path, but I can promise you that what I feel for you is real and rare and worth fighting for." Tears flowed freely down Yun's face as she looked at this man who had walked into her carefully ordered life and shown her possibilities she had never dared to imagine. "I feel it too," she whispered. "This connection, this recognition, this sense that meeting you was meant to happen. But Adrian, my whole life, my family's honor, everything depends on me fulfilling my obligations. I can't just abandon everything for a love that might not survive the distance and cultural differences." They spent Adrian's remaining 3 days together, stealing moments between Yun's work obligations and the reality that their time was running out. They visited the Temple of Heaven at sunrise, shared quiet meals in hidden restaurants, walked along the ancient city walls while sharing dreams and fears, and the growing certainty that they had found something extraordinary in each other. Adrian photographed Yun in dozens of settings, but his favorite image was spontaneous. Her laughing at something he had said while standing in a doorway of the Forbidden City, backlit by golden afternoon sun, looking like she belonged in an ancient painting of celestial beings. "This is how I want to remember you," he said, showing her the image on his camera's display. "Radiant and joyful and perfectly yourself." On Adrian's last night in Beijing, they returned to the park with the red lanterns. The festival was in full swing, with families celebrating beneath the warm glow, children running between the lights, couples making wishes for their futures. Adrian and Yun found a quiet corner where they could speak privately about the impossible situation they faced. "I don't want to make your life harder," Adrian said, holding both her hands as the lantern light played across their faces. "I don't want to be the reason you hurt your family or abandon your responsibilities. But I also can't pretend that what we've shared doesn't matter, that these feelings will just disappear when I get on the plane tomorrow." Yun nodded, her heart breaking and soaring simultaneously. "Let me make you a promise," Yun said, her voice steady despite her tears. "I will find a way to follow my heart, but I need to do it in a way that honors my family and my culture. It might take time, maybe years, but I believe that love this strong doesn't have an expiration date. If you can wait, if you can believe in something that requires faith rather than certainty, then maybe we can find our way to each other." Adrian pulled her close, both of them surrounded by the warm glow of hundreds of red lanterns and the knowledge that they were making a pact that would require tremendous courage from both of them. "I'll wait," he promised. "I'll go back to Spain and live my life, but I'll carry you with me in every photograph I take, every story I tell, every sunset I watch. And someday, when you're ready, I'll come back for you." They made love that night with the tenderness of people who knew they were creating a memory that would have to sustain them through an indefinite separation. Under the red lanterns and ancient stars, surrounded by the weight of history and the lightness of hope, Adrian and Yun wrote the first chapter of a love story that would require patience, faith, and the belief that some connections are strong enough to survive anything. 3 years later, Adrian received a message that made his hands shake as he read it. Yun had found a way to respectfully end her engagement, had convinced her family that choosing one's own path was not a betrayal of tradition, but an evolution of it. She had saved money, learned Spanish, and was ready to take the leap of faith they had promised each other under the red lanterns of Beijing. Adrian returned to the Forbidden City on a crisp autumn morning, his heart racing as he walked through the same gates where he had first seen Yun. She was waiting for him in the pavilion where they had shared their first private conversation, wearing a red dress that made her look like a lantern herself, glowing with happiness and nervous excitement. "You came back," she said simply, and he could hear 3 years of hope and fear and unwavering faith in those 3 words. "I promised I would," Adrian replied, taking her hands and feeling the same electric connection that had captured them both during their first meeting. The question is, are you ready for the adventure of a lifetime? They were married 6 months later in a ceremony that blended Spanish and Chinese traditions, surrounded by red lanterns and white roses, by family members who had learned that love stories don't always follow conventional paths, but are no less beautiful for their unexpected journeys. Yun moved to Spain, where she began working as a cultural consultant, while Adrian's photography career flourished with the deeper perspective that love had given his work. But they returned to Beijing every year during the Mid-Autumn Festival, walking beneath the red lanterns that had witnessed their promises, sharing their story with wide-eyed tourists who wondered if such fairy tale love really existed in the modern world. They would hold hands beneath the lights and remember that some loves are indeed written in the stars, destined to bloom under red lanterns, and patient enough to wait a lifetime for the perfect moment to become forever. Some loves are written in the stars above ancient palaces, destined to bloom under red lanterns, and patient enough to wait a lifetime for the perfect moment to become forever. Adrian and Yun had learned that the most beautiful love stories require not just passion, but patience. Not just connection, but courage. Not just dreams, but the faith to believe that when love is real, time and distance become merely temporary obstacles in a story that was always meant to have a happy ending. If this story touched your heart the same way it touched ours in telling it, leave a like so we can continue bringing these narratives that celebrate love's ability to bridge any distance and overcome any obstacle. Subscribe to the Untold Love Stories and ring the bell, because every week we share new stories of souls who proved that when love is destined, nothing, not time, not distance, not cultural differences, can keep 2 hearts from finding their way to each other. In the comments, tell us, do you believe some connections are written in the stars, waiting for the perfect moment to bloom? Your stories inspire us to create even more touching narratives. Until the next episode, remember, the most patient love is often the most powerful love, and sometimes the best things in life are worth waiting years to unfold.